Hello, this is the Research Methodology e-learning class, EST 326, Research Methodology. I am going to take you through the slides with a lot of explanations, so be cool and attentive. As you can see, there are 10 slides involved, so we are going to go through it one after the other. Hello, so how can you define research? Let us make an attempt to define what research is all about. To me, it's a careful study, a careful inquiry, or an examination to discover some facts, that have not been discovered before, and get information about a phenomenon or aspects of public life. So research is an investigation. It's a careful investigation or an inquiry, if you like, of so many things that brings to light new information or an expansion of an old information. For instance, an investigation of a cause and effect relationship that throws new light into aspects of theories that has existed before, but you are not throwing more light, you are not expanding it, or you can also refute it. It depends on which way your research goes, and we talk about problematization there. It's also a systematic method of discovering new facts. Actually, the bottom line is that you are trying to discover something new, over and above what you have as old information or an entirely new information, or you are trying to verify an old fact. The sequences, the interrelationships, the explanations, and so on and so forth. It's an inquiry into a new spectrum which provides information to more people about so many things, about so many issues, and can be used to solve problems in most of the cases. Now, what are the prerequisites for a research? One, you must have a good knowledge about the area of your research, otherwise you won't be able to do it as properly as you are supposed to. You must have a searching mind, an analytical mind. You don't take anything for granted. You try and think over it again and come out with something logical. You must have your facts by way of collecting information from wherever source or whatever source that is available. You must be in possession of an appropriate technique or a set of techniques that you are going to use to disseminate this information or to analyze this information. Your research must also be based on some problems or some facts which are known locally or internationally. Then you must use the scientific method. It's a prerequisite. That is not negotiable at all. Now, what are the purposes of research? Why do we need to do research at all? The most prominent of them is to solve problem, a particular problem, maybe for the society, for the community, anybody that is desirous of it. So really, one of the main purposes of research is problem solving. The other one, decision making. If you are stuck between making a decision, about 1, 2, 3 things, you can go on and carry out a research, and the research will show you which one is the most desirable which is the most reliable path to follow based on empirical evidence. Or you can use research also for comparison. It fits in as a good purpose for comparison. If you have 2 or 3 phenomena you want to compare, you can use research. You can research into all of them and see the best way to compare, or the analysis of comparison and all that. Can also be for historical purpose. Something that has passed and you are trying to research into it and find out what really happened at that particular time. You can also use research for theory building, that's building theories, especially when your research is to start from concept, usually for qualitative research. Then you can build theory from there, over time. Then you can also test existing theories. Theories that are in existence before can be tested and retested to establish their validity from time to time. And it can be done for pursuit of knowledge. Yes. Then you will remember that in the last slide I talked about the scientific method. What exactly is the scientific method? It's a method that you apply in research, and I did say that you cannot escape it, you cannot bypass it. What does it involve? It involves observation, measurement, documentation of your observations. You have to observe, you have to measure, whether quantitatively or qualitatively. You have to present your report in a special way or specified manner, so that it can qualify to be part of the debate among researchers. Your work must be reproducible. Somebody else somewhere can pick it up and just use the same methodology and get results, which may not necessarily be similar to your own results, because there may be 1 or 2 differences in environmental conditions, but the basic methodology can be reproduced, can be replicated. Then you must have rigorous skepticism, as I said before, and an analytical mind. You don't just believe anything until you are sure empirically that is the way to go. Then you hypothesize from deduction. That's when you are deducing from theory, or question by induction when you are inducing to theory. That can be explained later under the quantitative and qualitative research. Then your argument must be logical, and you must be able to make predictions from your logical arguments. Nothing that you just take from the blues. Everything is based on what you have found out, and based also on logic and cognitive reasoning. Then your thinking must also be critical, as we said before. You need critical thinking, not a one-way thinking. You must think very deeply and connect facts together in a way that you make deductions that are reasonable and acceptable to the research community. On the right side, you will find a schematic just explaining the scientific method, how you go about it, and so that you can actually justify whatever you are doing. Well, classification of research. We can classify research by purpose, by character, and by methods, majorly. By purpose, we will have pure or basic research, applied research, evaluation and action research. But when evaluation and action research are considered very squarely, you find that they still form part of the applied research. By character, you will have qualitative and quantitative research. And by methods, you will have research like historical, descriptive, observational, ex post facto, experimental, quasi-experimental. Because classification by method implies that you are looking at the set of methods and techniques and the tools that are used in the performance of that exercise. Now let's start with the first one. Pure or basic research. Pure or basic research aims at primarily obtaining theoretical knowledge and the logical process involved in the phenomenon. It pursues knowledge for the sake of knowledge itself. Actually, it could be termed as an intellectual exercise aimed at finding theoretical conclusions. For example, pure mathematics, quantum physics, and so on and so forth. Applied research, it is empirical. Applied research is empirical and practical, as the name suggests. And the research result is practically applied to solve immediate problems and prescribing normative policies, e.g. applied mathematics. That readily comes to mind. Other types of applied research, well, as I said before, are evaluation and action research. Evaluation research is conducted to determine the relative worth of usefulness of two or more alternative actions. Classifying research by character, we will have qualitative research and quantitative research. Qualitative research explains the subject without prior formulations, no prior theory, starting from concept. The object is to gain understanding and collect information that are such as theories may emerge. As I said before, some researches are deductive, or inductive, which will induce to theory, and they are mostly qualitative research. So you start from theory, from concept, and you move on to theory. So qualitative research here is saying the same thing, that you collect information, and from that information and observations and concept, theories may emerge. Qualitative research is a precursor to quantitative research. In most cases, you start from concept and you go to theory, particularly when many theories have developed and laws have been established. The research is often without the use of statistical analysis, but rigors and objectivity are of paramount importance. Mostly, qualitative data are subjective data, can and should be analyzed objectively using quantitative techniques where possible. In qualitative research, you move from observation to theory. I have said that, and that is inductive. You are induced to theory in your work. Quantitative research adopts scientific method just like the other one too, but not as much as quantitative. In which initial study of theory and literature yields precise aims and objectives. Then from there, hypotheses to be tested are elicited. However, the use of quantitative and quantitative techniques together is what we call the mixed method, the mixed mode, if you like, to study research topic, and that can be very powerful to gain insights and results to assist in making inferences and drawing conclusions. What I'm saying in effect that you could have a combination of quantitative research and qualitative research, and you call it mixed mode research. And they can run concurrently in most cases. In order to study the research title, to do justice to the research title, they can run concurrently. But basically they can run independently too, and they can be matched together at the end of the day to see how one complements the other. Then if you classify research by methods, talking about method of research, what would you have? You will have historical research, which is called evolutionary research, and you also have descriptive research. Historical research studies past events and synthesizes evidence just to establish facts. The primary sources are items original to the problem being investigated, remains or relics of periods under investigation such as skeletons, fossils, tools, weapons, buildings, furniture, pictures, coins, and so on. These objects serve as evidence. Talking about historical research now. Could also come in form of manuscripts, laws, charters, records, files, letters, memoranda, biography, mails, newspapers, and so on and so forth. Diagrams, maps, catalogs, films, painting, logbooks, and stuff like that for historical. But when you look at it, there are some problems associated with historical research. Before I go into that, some of the sources may also be from second-hand information. If you can't find first-hand information, then you go for second-hand. So quoted materials, encyclopedias, textbooks, prints, they also come handy. But historical research has some problems. One, it is difficult to authenticate the genuineness, accuracy, and what of the historical data obtained can be questionable. Then there's some advantages. It throws light on present and future trends. It allows for the evaluation of data, in relation to selected theories and generalization. And I can give an example of that. The development of, for instance, the development of university education in Nigeria, 1960 to 1990, is an example of an historical research, or residential property value trend in Lagos, 1990 to 2000 and whatever. That's historical because it goes back. Now I go to descriptive research. Descriptive research just reports things the way they are. You collect data, you test the hypothesis raised in the research questions raised in the study, and this research typology attempts to report things the way they are. The conditions that exist, the practices that prevail, beliefs, and points of view or attitudes that are developing. These are good examples of descriptive research. That's what they do really. Then you specify who and who are to be measured. Example of descriptive research, for instance, significant level of primary mortgage institution in low income housing in Lagos State. We are just trying to find out what they do there without altering anything, just reporting what is happening there, or the significance of it. That's what you are reporting. Now I go into types of descriptive research. Descriptive research is very important because most of the times in environmental studies we find ourselves doing descriptive research. There are three types really: survey research, 2, developmental scrutinizing the content of a particular work and getting the core out of it. The core conveying issues out of the book or the study. Naturalistic, observing certain types of behavior as they occur naturally. Naturalistic, as they occur naturally. E.g., leadership style, attitude to work. You have to allow them to occur naturally to get the best out of your research. So it's naturalistic. You just observe people, how they do their work and all that without them knowing anyway. Then simulation observation creates the situation to be observed. You create it. You are the one that is producing that situation to be observed, and the subjects are told what activities they should engage in. You know, if for instance you ask a teacher or a student to act as a teacher, you know, you are creating that scenario, making the student a teacher. Then you now observe whether his performances are good. It's more of theatric, you know. Then case study, you investigate a situation or an institution or individual group or a group of people or an individual. You make him a case, a case study. You know, the major disadvantage of case studies are that the researchers may see only what he wants to see, because you pick a case study and you concentrate so much on it. So after so much concentration, you might be seeing what you want to see if you are not careful. You know, then you have content analysis, a thorough description of what the object of study contains for assessing. E.g., you take a study, you study it, you look at the core points there and see whether they recur in many places. Example of desirable partners attribute as perceived by clients through observation, through regular occurrence. Then you'll be able to make deductions as to how you can perceive the clients, or the effect of partners leadership role on survey job performance. The baseline is that you look at the content, you focus on the content, on the object of the study, a thorough description of the subject of the study. To be able to study it, you need complete focus and attention. Hello, there's also correlational research, and this correlational research determines whether a relationship exists between two or more variables. We can give examples of that. Relationship between, for instance, location of property and its rental value. That is talking about relationship. The relationship between location of property and it does not show a cause-effect relationship. I must warn here, it does not show a cause-effect relationship. All it shows is a relationship that does not confirm the cause and effect, an association, so to speak. Just that there's an association between two or more variables, not a cause-effect relationship. So it correlates two or more variables and shows whether there's an association between them. Then you have ex post facto. Ex post facto, that is causal comparative. Ex post facto determines cause and effect relationship by examining and tracing back the information and available data for probable causal factors. For example, if it is observed that a difference occurs in the behavior of groups of individuals, the researcher attempts to determine the cause or the reason for the existing difference. So it's ex post facto, really. Ex post facto, after the fact. Hence, the name ex post facto, that is after the fact. In ex post facto research, the effect and the alleged cause have already occurred, but both conditions are studied in retrospect. Ex post facto or causal comparative study starts with an identified effect and proceed to find the possible causes. So it's so easy to understand. There's no difficulty. It's a research that is done after the fact, after the event has happened. So it's a matter of going now to find the cause. The event has already happened, but they are going to find the cause. What else? I don't want to lose sight of that. In comparing causal comparative research and experimental research, I think we'll get that later on. Let me go to experimental research. Experimental research deliberately controls and manipulates the conditions which determine the events it is interested in. That presupposes that you have independent variable and dependent variable. The dependent variable is the variable of importance, and the independent variable is the variable of manipulation. You can manipulate that, but the ultimate outcome is the dependent variable. The independent variable is independent and is subject to manipulation, but you cannot manipulate the dependent variable because that is the ultimate outcome. The independent variable is presumed to be the cause. It's presumed to be the cause, whereas the dependent variable is the outcome, as I said. So there is no mix up there. It's so easy to understand. What else now? In experimental research, the researcher deliberately controls and manipulates the conditions which determine the event he is interested in. Normally, an experiment makes a change in a variable, which is normally referred to as the independent variable. Then observe the effects of the change on another variable known as the dependent variable. The independent variable is presumed to be the cause, while the influence affects the outcome, which is the dependent variable. The main purpose of experimental research is to investigate the cause and effect relationship between variables by exposing. What it does is to expose the experimental group to one or more treatments and compare the result with the control group not receiving the treatment. The independent variables are controlled to ensure that they are not affected by extraneous variables, as the fundamental purpose of experimental design is to impose control over conditions that will otherwise cloud the true effect of the independent variable upon the dependent variable. Though the point here is control, there is always a control. Examples of experimental research includes, for instance, if you want to investigate the effect of drug on the performance of athletes in a 100-meter dash, or the effect of constant change of school and student performance at the terminal class in the secondary school. It must be noted that in experimental research, all variables are held constant except the treatment variable, which is deliberately allowed to vary. The control group, that's the untreated group, is compared against the experimental group, that is the treated group. So you compare the untreated with the treated. The untreated is the control, so to speak, and the treated is the outcome. If you apply certain treatments, then if there's a difference, then that it means that the what you applied is the cause of the effect that we are seeing. The selection of respondents to the group is done randomly for proper representation and generalization. Then we go to the quasi-experimental research. The quasi-experimental research, you don't control anything there. There is no control. You cannot control. You cannot manipulate all relevant variables. Maybe in many cases the researcher may have some partial control of the independent variable, but not total control. It is applied in situations where the researcher cannot control or manipulate all relevant variables. It is applicable where true experimental research appears impossible to carry out. The researcher only has partial control, as we have said before. Example of quasi-experimental research are, for instance, if you are interested in knowing the effect of partners' leadership style on workers' performance. In an experiment situation, we all know that it's impossible for the researcher to control or measure directly some of the intervening variables. For instance, a worker's performance could be affected by a worker's family background or religious beliefs. It is difficult to determine the effect of these intervening variables because the researcher cannot control them. He cannot control them. The quasi-experimental research observes the true experimental research strategies as far as possible, but they are not the same thing because the control elements are not there, while making room for partial control, not full control. I hope this is understood.